Welcome to Good Grief, the podcast where resilience meets reality. I'm your host, Dr. Christine Malone. In this podcast, we delve deep into the stories of individuals who've triumphed over tragedy, adversity, and trauma. In every episode, we bring you raw and honest narratives from guests who faced life's most challenging moments head on. Through candid conversations, they share their journeys of resilience, shedding light on the strategies, mindset shifts, and support systems that empowered them to rise above their darkest hours. Join us as we explore the profound depths of human resilience and discover how, even in the face of life's toughest trials, there can be light, growth, and yes, good grief. Okay, listeners, thank you so much for joining me for this podcast today. My guest is Mike Cinelli, and Mike's going to tell us a story about how he broke free from addiction and kind of how that's transformed his life and the book he's written. So, Mike, if you'd like to go ahead and just introduce yourself and let the guests know kind of your background and a bit about you.
Yeah, hey, my name is Mike Cinelli, and I'm just so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I just part of writing this book and my story is just to provide hope for people. Throughout the book, I write all the gritty details of my life and some of the really hard places that I was in my drug addiction, some of the hard emotions that I had to deal with and cope with. But it all started out of trauma. My mom passed away when I was 6 years old.
Mm.
She suffered for 3 years from lung cancer, so she was in and out of hospitals. And so she was really absent 3 years prior when I was 4 years old, but I didn't understand what was happening. Nobody took the time to really explain it to me. My dad was in shock, like, we're just trying to get through this time. And I was left alone to figure it out. We were Christians, and my dad, somebody in the church came to me and told me that she had a dream that if we prayed hard enough, my mom would be healed. And she still passed away. And so now I'm angry at my dad for what he stands for. I'm angry at this God who's supposed to heal my mom. And I'm angry at I didn't know this at the time, but I was angry at my mom feeling like she abandoned me.
Mm-hmm.
These are all the things that I've later on, I didn't even understand what I was going through. And I felt isolated and alone. So as I grew up, my dad threw himself more into the church because he was hurt, and we talk about it now years later, but he was hurt and he didn't know what to do with his feelings. So he did what he thought was best, but that really showed me abandonment. He wasn't available for me. So now I'm figuring out life on my own. He remarries to a younger woman and we don't get along very well. We kind of clash. And now I'm even further out, lost, feeling alone, isolated. Friends and things happen, birthday parties happen, but I always felt like I was in this fog.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything was real blurry and I couldn't really figure out all these people's emotions and everything that was happening. I was just so traumatized in my heart. So as I got older, I found that, hey, alcohol and smoking marijuana and all these things can make me feel a little bit better about myself. I'm suffering here and I need to figure out a way out.
Right.
And so that's how I coped. I started using drugs, cocaine, heroin, got really deep homeless and really bad into, heroin addiction. But
How long,
yeah,
how long
I
did that
go ahead.
last for? How long was it that's that period of time?
All chemicals was 20 years. I started doing heroin a few years, about 5 years after I started doing cocaine and stuff.
Mm.
So yeah, about 15 years was the heroin addiction.
Wow. Okay. And what was it that got you out of that? I mean, what I know that you're going to tell us about that in your book and so on, but I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Share that part.
Well, I truly believe that faith is part of something that really helped me. There's been studies done, and I'm not a doctor, but there's been studies done that having faith in hope and higher power and God can really be beneficial to somebody's recovery.
Yeah.
So for me, it was my faith. I feel like I would white knuckle it a lot. And in my faith, it talks about surrender. So I know that. And in the 12 steps, I mean, I go to a Celebrate Recovery, which is 12 step. And, I've been through AA and NA and I've done I truly believe in the 12 steps. I think that it's a huge benefit to somebody that's struggling with a drug addiction. It gives a lot of structure and meaning and purpose. So for me, that's what it was, is finding hope and finding purpose and surrendering all those things. For so many years, I white knuckled it, thought I could just redouble my efforts,
Mm-hmm.
and it just doesn't work that way. And so I started in therapy every week in the beginning. Those deep rooted things that are creating the resentments and all the anger and the frustration and all the things that I'm suffering from, that I'm trying to quiet with the drugs, I
Right.
can now talk about it and get it out in the open. And that, with my faith, has really helped me. It's like a synergistic effect where it has like pushed me through. And I feel that I'm not white knuckling into this miserable existence where I feel like I have to use to
Yeah.
feel better.
Yeah. You're not alone, right? I mean, it's like that. That's just it. I mean, people try to tackle things like that by themselves. And it's like, I don't know many people who succeed. I mean, and if they do, that's fantastic, but it's not the norm. So,
Right.
having some support system, whatever that looks like. Obviously the AAs, NAs are, huge, huge help to a lot of people in the world.
Yes.
Sure. So at what point did you realize or decide you wanted to write your book? Because I know your book is a memoir. So when did that come about?
So it started that my therapist was actually asking me to do a timeline and write some of my story. And when I was younger, I liked poetry a lot, and I wrote some poetry, and I was really into vocabulary. And that kind of re-sparked something in my brain as I was writing this stuff. And my aunt, which is my mom's sister, which is we're super close because she kind of took me under her wing before my dad remarried and really helped me walk through those young years. She loves creative writing. And so I kind of started sending her some of that stuff, which was super freeing because it was like the world knows some of that stuff that I've told myself I wouldn't tell anybody. And
Hmm.
now the world kind of knows. And it's like, it's actually freedom in that, that
Yeah.
the world actually knows, because now you're not hiding in isolation anymore. And so that really started to spark inside of me. And I was like, okay, I think I can do this. And so I got a coach, a writing coach, that helped me like figure out and map the book. And then I started writing and sending it to my aunt. And it took me 3 years from start to finish, because I had to take a lot of breaks. I mean, that I was remembering stuff that I never wanted to remember again
Yeah.
and writing it out in detail. But the healing that was involved, I would tell anybody that if you want to heal, get a really good therapist that you can trust and write your story, whether it becomes a book or not, who cares?
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. I felt the same way when I published my book. There were things in there that I had buried pretty darn deep, and there were things that I again, like you said, didn't want anybody to ever know. I was ashamed of a lot of it. And I remember thinking after I finally put it together, I don't have anything to be ashamed of. I really don't. I mean, I survived some things, and that really isn't, something that I need to be ashamed of. And choices that I've made, I made them, and all I can do is learn from them. And writing them down and admitting to them was amazingly healing for me. And I had been in therapy for many, many years before I decided to do the book. And I went,
Wow.
I should have done that decades ago. But yeah,
Years ago, yeah.
it's amazing. And again, I remember the woman that I worked with when I was writing my book even said to me, you don't have to ever share this with anybody, just putting it out there and writing it all down and so on is helpful. But yeah,
Yeah.
that was kind of my thing. So how long has your book been out?
May 10th.
Of this year?
of this year. Yeah.
Awesome.
May 10th was actually my mom's birthday. And
Oh,
so I purposely, it was kind of around that time that seemed like it was going to be able to come out. And her birthday was always a rough time for me in the years past. And, the body keeps score and all that stuff. And
yeah.
she passed away June 12th. So those couple of months, May and June, and Mother's Day's in there, were really tough times for me. So I said, you know what? Let's create a new memory,
Yeah.
and moving forward, this is going to be a happy and exciting day, you
Right.
know?
Yeah,
So,
no, that's great. I've heard that before, and that's a great thing. So the people that you think could be interested in picking up and reading your book, I mean, who's your audience? Who's it is it aimed at? I mean, obviously it was aimed for you to tell your story, but who do you think benefits the most or would benefit the most from reading your book?
well, the person I wrote it to was the suffering addict. I
Okay.
used some language in there that I feel like only an addict in their darkest time would probably understand. But also, it has been helping a lot of parents
Yeah.
and people, loved ones of the addict, because it renews their hope. My dad stuck by me all those years, showed up. He started to figure out how to not to enable me
Mhm.
after a few years, but he never left me. He never
Yeah.
gave up on me. So those are the people that have been really helped. But I did write it in such a way for the suffering addict to really hopefully draw them out of their pain for a second and let them see something different.
Yeah. Well, and the word hope is so big there. It's like, for them to
Yeah,
see that, you aren't in this place that you can't get out of. You can get out, and your way out may be different than their way out, but I mean, you can get out. And I think that
right.
message is very helpful. I know in many cases, especially where having worked in healthcare for many years, that just people with whatever condition they have, whatever, if they have something they can be hopeful for. Not that I'm gonna be completely cured, but I am gonna be able to learn to do this again, or whatever that may be. And that just that mentality mind shift change really makes a difference, right? It really makes a person,
Huge difference.
right? It's kind of like when you don't feel well and you really start to just, oh, I don't feel well. Well, you're not going to feel well. But if you start thinking,
Yeah,
I'm going to do better if I do this, your mind just starts to change that reality, which is so powerful. When people get a hold of that, it's like, yeah, you can do good and bad with this, So
right.
it's that, yeah, that kind of thing. So if we were, if you were having a listener here who would be, thinking about, let's start with maybe the person who's actively in addiction. I know the word hope is there. You've got stuff in your book that would be helpful, but what else might you suggest that would be useful? I mean, I love the part about your dad standing by you, so that's going to answer kind of part of my next question, which is what the surrounding people, the people who love you, can do.
Yeah, like we said, never give up. But I would say the soonest you possibly can get yourself to the point of going to therapy and talking about some of those deep things that you feel so ashamed about, the sooner the better. Be encouraged. Find somebody that you feel comfortable with. That's okay. But don't feel ashamed to talk about this stuff. There's healing and allowing the world to know it. And it helps so many people. But some practical stuff is to not enable your loved one if they're in drugs. I have some resources on my website for like finding detoxes, finding rehabs, you know, the reflection of the day and different things. So you can go there, MikeCinelli.com. But yeah, just to never give up on your loved one is the main thing. Is there is hope, and there's always a way out.
Yeah, yeah. And those are always the stories when you hear them, are always the feel good ones. As I was sharing with you earlier about my son's friend and how he came out of addiction after just, yeah, so many times where you wouldn't think this was ever going to happen. I remember thinking I'm going to get a call about him, overdosing and no longer here. That was my thought. And it's like, oh, gotta get past that. So your book is called Reinvented. So is the title kind of all about how you've done your work to become someone new, someone different, or is that kind of what that title is about?
Yeah, I had this like word come up in my mind several years ago, reinvented. and just to surrender to allowing yourself to be reinvented to a new life. And these things were rolling around in me. And so when this whole thing came together, I actually fought the idea for a while, but some things happened that kind of confirmed that that was going to be the title. So it's been a word that's been with me for a long time.
Yeah. Well, it definitely fits. I mean, from the stories that you've just shared, it's like I'm thinking to myself, what a perfect title for your book.
Thank you.
Sometimes you hear a title, you're like, where did it come from? I'm just curious to know where that come from.
Yeah.
But yours seems terribly obvious. So what we're going to do for your podcast is we will definitely have a link to your website on there and to your book, so listeners can find you and can read your book and benefit from that. But is there anything else you'd like to share before we end today?
I'm just so thankful to be here. I'm so thankful to share my story. I really hope that my story will resonate with people and help them see that there is hope for them as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. No, I think that's definitely the message I'm getting today. So yeah, for sure. Well, Mike, thank you again for being my guest today. It's been a pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Good Grief. We hope that stories shared today have inspired and empowered you on your own journey of resilience. If you want to dive deeper into the themes of trauma, tragedy, and survival, be sure to check out my memoir, The Day I Became the Spider Killer, a memoir of trauma, tragedy, and survival. In this book, I shared my own raw and honest experiences, offering insights and strategies for overcoming life's toughest challenges. You can purchase the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or listen to it on Audible. Your support helps us continue to bring these powerful stories to light and spread a message of hope and resilience. Stay tuned for more incredible stories on our next episode. Until then, remember, even in the face of life's toughest trials, there can be light, growth, and good grief.